Hello and welcome to another episode of the Bazaar Over Explained, and we are talking about the hot fixes that are pretty impactful, frankly, that have come out for the Bazaar in the last couple days. So let's get into it. The first one is lifesteal no longer counts as healing, so it's no longer going to cleanse the poison or fire damage that's on you, which is pretty huge, which also really impacts with another change here. The poison and burn builds, they just got a lot better because heal cleanses now, instead of 10%, it cleanses 5% of the amount healed. So, and if we healed for 100, we would cleanse 10 poison. Now we would only cleanse 5 poison instead. So pretty big buff here for elemental builds. The next piece here is that max health per level has increased. We have increased the base HP gains per level after level 7. If you're interested, I have a little spreadsheet on how this used to work. And basically how it used to work is we would get plus 50 to a stacking portion of max HP per day. So at level 1 to level 2, we would gain 50 max HP, and then we would gain 50 plus another 50, and then so on and so forth. So we would get 50, 100, 150, 200 for those portions of the game. So now it looks like that has changed. So it says here increase base HP gains per level after level 7. So we'll see what that means. Ultimately, I guess this means that your synergy builds are probably going to be stronger in the later portions of the game than your stat-based builds. So once we hit level 7, this will be a pretty interesting breakpoint for us to start seeing how much that increase has changed. They say this results in around 11% increase by level 10 and 32% increase by level 15, and I assume that's compared to where it was before. So we're going to gain more HP in the later portions of the game. Generally speaking, this is going to be at probably day 6 or day 7 and above. There's where we're going to start seeing people at level 7. So it's pretty interesting. Also, another big change here is level 10 and 19 now offers a choice of 2 specific enchanted pedestals. They changed it in the most recent patch where you would only get 1 random pedestal, so now you get 2. That's a pretty big change. Honestly, this I think is pretty good. I like the initial phase of the game where we had only the 1 random pedestal, just because you didn't necessarily know what you were going to get, and if you had a really strong build, you could just go there and it would be much harder to get something to synergize with your build, and thus for the builds that were really lacking, and then they get their death enchant, then they would have a little bit more of an advantage over the people that were doing well in the game, just because they had a more specific enchant they could put on their items. But in practice, it really was frustrating because sometimes you'd really be relying on getting to level 10 to get that specific enchant on your item. And so I like that this change has been implemented. And then there's a host of bug fixes here. I'm not going to go too much into them. I'll just go straight into the items changes. Just know for the bug fixes, I'll link the patch notes below. But a lot of this is maybe inconsequential for a lot of your runs or most of your runs, but still some good stuff to know that they've changed, because it's always nice to see where the progress is. The next thing here is in the item changes, Tanky Anki. And man, when I first saw this item, I thought that it was pretty insane. Turns out it's pretty insane. So the cooldown has been increased, the damage has been nerfed. It no longer has the weapon damage reduction, which is honestly the most frustrating portion of this item. Before, it would reduce the amount of damage that your opponents had on their weapons. Now it no longer does that. And I'm not gonna lie, I kind of thought that they were gonna take this off the item, giving both that and the shielding clause, where it would make your dinosaurs shield for each amount of damage that they did, was already pretty insane. So now you're not just going to get your builds completely negated by Tanky Anki, which is awesome. And instead of going to the box cutter, I'll talk about that in a segment. Let me just talk about the dinosaur build in general. It has been nerfed. So Tanky Anki was one of the big nerfs here. Mamasaur now can't proc twice during a fight. It just says the first time you use this, you destroy a small or medium item. So it no longer has that conditional clause where it says if they have 6 or 5 or whatever amount of items on board to actually go off. Now it's always going to go off. So in a way that's a buff, but it is going to give you less permanent damage each time it goes off. And Dinosaur got the same exact treatment. With that, that's pretty big here. The other piece here is the primal core has been reduced in damage to 30 instead of 50. So it's going to be doing a lot less damage. And that was really super annoying with the dinosaur builds, which is that they negated all of your weapon damage. They had a ton of damage on their board because they could scale it pretty ridiculously, especially in some instances of the monster fights. So this is a really good change, I think, and we were getting to a point where the dinosaur builds were kind of taking over the meta and there wasn't a good counter for them just because they were so defensive and offensive at the same time. But yeah, so good to see that sort of thing. Now let's jump back up to the box cutter. So the box cutter in my latest video, as you might have saw, it's a pretty insane item. It does an obscene amount of damage, and they've nerfed the damage numbers on it rather significantly. This thing could be doing 300 damage really easily, and on a pretty low cooldown at that. So the box cutter has been nerfed, and that's a really good thing for us. The next thing here is the railgun has had some numbers changes. So in the latest patch, we could now start getting it at bronze, and now it's going to be doing 50 less damage at the bronze tier, at silver tier, and now it is going to be doing 50 more damage at gold tier, and it's then going to be doing 200 more damage at diamond tier. I really like this change because I thought that the railgun was kind of lacking in the later portions of the game when you could actually get it to gold and diamond. And so, but it really didn't need a lot of help early game. It was still a nice damage dealer. And sometimes it was a little obscene just doing 150 damage on such a low cooldown or doing 300 damage on such a low cooldown before. So I think that this is a really, plays way better into where I think the railgun should realistically be. It's still at silver tier is pretty potent, but not obscene. But when we can get it to gold and diamond, that's really nice. The forklift also has had reduction in damage. And I'll be honest, the item kind of falls off in the, I want to say later portions of the game, talking about like day 7, day 8, that sort of stuff. So you're probably even harder going to have to try and transition out of this forklift just because it's not super set up to be a late game item. Next item here is Flintstones. So has been nerfed, has a higher cooldown, ultimately going to burn a little bit less, but it is still, I think, going to be rather potent when it does, but before it was able to kind of solo carry your damage dealing just because of how much burn it could do. So the numbers are much more in line where I personally think they should be, so I'd love to see that. And then this is some changes that we'll see for the new Mac items, which I think are all very good, which is buffs. So the Soul Stone has a reduced cooldown to 4 seconds. Love to see that just because it's not the most impactful item in its stats and numbers. And then for like the Sands of Time, the Frost Totem, the Blank Slate, these, and also talking about like the Idol of Decay and Life Conduit, all those questing items, the amount of items that we have to buy have been reduced. So let's see if we can look at that. So I pulled up the Mobalytics article here where it was all spoiled in the first place, at least where I saw it first, and then it credits all the people who actually spoiled the items. So if you want to check those people out, I think they're great creators. Feel free to click those buttons here. I'll link this all below. But this Frost Totem and again, Idol of Decay, when we see all these items, generally what it said is buy 10 of the specific type of item, and then buy 20 relics specifically, or buy 10 poison items and have a certain amount of poison on your opponent. So let's look at Frost Totem with those numbers in mind. So Frost Totem now, we have to buy 4 freeze items, and we had to buy 10 before. And then with that, buy 5 relics, and when you use another relic, you charge this compared to buy 20 relics. Notably, I believe that buy 4 freeze items was actually implemented already in the patch before, so it's interesting to see this in the patch notes here, but I believe we still had to buy 10 relics. So overall, it just takes a little bit less to get these Sands of Time and Frost Totem, Blank Slate, and all that up and running. With that, also, big changes here. So the Sands of Time now slows multiple items, which I think is great just because before, even if you had this thing at Diamond tier, it was slowing one item for, I believe, 1 second. And even if it was slowing one item for 4 seconds, that's not nearly enough of an impact. So now it's going to be slowing multiple items, and this is the exact type of effect that you actually want on your slow boards. So I think that this item just got a lot better. Additionally, the cooldown has been reduced on the Frost Totem, which is really interesting to see because it in itself was already pretty potent, and now that it has a much lower cooldown, I think that this thing can kind of be perma-freezing boards. So this might be a little problematic. We'll see. We'll see how it all transpires. Then the Blank Slate, the cooldown has been reduced. We love to see that. The poison and all the different quest numbers here have been changed a little bit. We can go back to the article here and see what they were spoiled to us originally, where it was do 50 of each different effect across the board, and now it is poison 50, so that has still remained the same, but regen 40 times, burn 30 times, slow 20 times, freeze 10 times. So everything outside the poison is much easier to do. I'm unsure if these numbers have changed. I don't have access, and I didn't see where these poison numbers or where the status numbers that I would get from completing the quest were before. I imagine that these have been buffed. I don't know that for sure, just because, again, that information is not readily available. I don't think it's on howbazaar.gg. Let's see. No, it is not. Okay. So unsure about exactly what these numbers are going to change for this. And then also one thing to know about this item is when it was first spoiled to us, I believe they had talked about how when you completed one of these quests, it would lock off the other quests, but it looks like in the game it doesn't actually lock off the other quests. So we can have this blank slate with all these sort of things, at least from the experience where I saw it last. Mind you, that could have changed already, but just putting that out there. And then, yeah, Life Conduit, Idol of Decay, Eternal Torch, all those other items that had quests. We now have to buy less items, and I think that's really good just because it took so much gold to actually go and purchase 10 of the requisite items that it was asking for, and then these items can get online a lot sooner, which is pretty nice. Other things here are more inconsequential, just some types that got on different items. Sea Shadow is now reduced in the amount of cooldown reduction it gives. We were just saying that cooldown reduction, and mind you, when I originally talked about cooldown reduction, I kind of talked about it incorrectly because my understanding was incorrect. And actually from a Kripparrian video, I saw that he basically clarified that it has been buffed, not nerfed. So now it's additive instead of doing percentage base, and thus it is kind of more cooldown reduction if you can get feathers and if you can get wings, which is pretty interesting. I'm not a math major, I'm no math guy, so I'm not going to speak more to that because I'll probably get it wrong a second time. But from my understanding, cooldown reduction from those specific items, those loot items, is more impactful. And then, yeah, so those are the major changes here for June 6th. And now I'll talk about June 4th if you were not aware. These ones are pretty interesting. So this was like right when the patch went live. Most notably, they put this chimeric egg in, and it can now spawn any size friend, which is pretty interesting. Before, I guess it was only a small friend. The big change was that the hydraulic press was an obscene item. It had a 16-second cooldown, and then I think they made it do a little bit less damage and have a higher cooldown. But I'll be honest with you, I have played the hydraulic press build, I think like 4 or 5 times now, and gotten a 10 win on 4 of them pretty handily. This item is really easy to enable. If you want a secret on how to make this really good, you just get the hydraulic press, you eat a core, and then you get the remote control. And so instead of having a 20-second item, you have a 10-second cooldown one, and there's ways to charge this too because it is a tech item. So yeah, this hydraulic press build is very good. I'll see if I can put out a video on it. I'm working on a Dually guide where I put out all the different builds on Dually, and thus with that, you will hopefully have access to all the information you would need to know to play all of your Dually builds. And if you have any questions about Dually, I'm going to put a post out today that basically allows you to ask any questions, and then I'll put that into my video. But all this said, other things here from this hotfix, the red button had a, I want to say nerfed cooldown, and the remote control as well. So the hydraulic press build overall was pretty obscene. Toxic Flame, I believe, was also nerfed. This is also now very interesting to know. Expedition ticket option no longer spawns after day 8. So if you had the airdrome before, you could get the ticket on day 9, but it would do nothing. So good to know. Yeah, those are the most impactful changes from these 2 hotfixes. Interested to see what you all think about them. I'm personally pretty excited that the dinosaur builds have been nerfed, specifically in Tanky Yankee. I think this item was very frustrating to play against and pretty much warped the meta. I'm also super excited to see that the Mac items have been buffed. I've tried to make them work. It was really hard to do so. You kind of had to get the right enchantments on your Idol of Decay, Eternal Torch, or Life Conduit to make it really feel that good. But they were still potent in their own right, but we'll see if this is now too much. But that'll be a thing for probably our next hotfix. Regardless, I am the Bazaar Whisperer. Thanks for joining me here today. If you like what I do, well, hey, I could just say like, I could say subscribe. That would all be really well. What I would really love to do is talk to you down in the comments below. And most of all, I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day or evening. Bye-bye.